the question, how do we as youth get involved actively to ensure the plan is carried out? How do we as youth get actively involved to ensure the minister's plan is carried out?
All right, Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Vuyo. I think we've seen very active participation of young people over the period already. The jam was a resounding success because young people decided to take this up. This phase over the next few months is going to be very important, and we need to say to young people again, the plan is yours. Take it apart, but very importantly, before you walk away from it, put it together again. If you think that the 100 actionable steps are too many, tell us what the priorities should be. If you think there are too few, talk to us about them. Some of us in the Commission think that more should be, we need more steps in the plan to deal with ICT, for instance, because it is going to be a game changer over the next period. And young people understand this exceedingly well. Talk to us about this. But I think that first step, that first involvement is fundamentally important for young people. When we had the jam at the end of September, people logged on, and we were able to, now that we've put animations on YouTube, go back to those people and invite them to download. And there's actually a very close correlation, because people who've been involved in advising the Planning Commission thus far feel that they need to continue to take ownership of the issues. And that's very exciting. And I think it's that handing over the baton so that decision-making shifts. We need people to be involved in the issues of the plan.
Leanne, do you have a question from the viewers? All right, we seem to have
this one's saying,
lost our connection there. All right, okay.
Okay, can you hear us there, Peter? All right, let me read it. Hopefully they'll be able to. This is sent by Mandla Klengwa, saying, I've been through to MPC Vision 2030, and my interest is rural development in terms of job creation and development. I would like to ask Trevor Manuel how to access relevant ministers and MECs of KZN regarding the presentation of rural development programs that can create more than 7,000 jobs in rural KZN. Mandla Klengwa writing to us. I hope you heard that one.
I did, Leanne. The chapter on inclusive and integrated rural economy is actually pretty detailed, because it breaks down activities, agricultural and non-agricultural, in rural areas, not only by geographic space but also by product. And so almost immediately there's a prospect of creating something like 987,643 jobs. It's that kind of detailed. In rural KwaZulu-Natal, there's a proposal to extend irrigation in the Makatini Flats area, just like in rural Eastern Cape. The proposal is to get irrigation systems in the Umzimvubu River Basin. Now, I just checked with my colleague Minister Nkwinti yesterday. He's very excited about being able to do this, and I'm pretty sure that between him and his colleague Tina Jumat-Patterson and the MECs, they keen to drive this process. So we should involve people, because it's one of those big change areas. As I said earlier, we have to give life to land, and this is what the proposal is all about.
All right, just to get some clarity, Minister, are you saying that there's still time to change the plan? It's not cast in stone, that you're consulting and people can have input? Up until when, and when will you say, okay, this is what we're doing, and it kicks off on this day, and what day is that?
Look, the date of kickoff was the 11th of the 11th, 2011. We would have wanted it to be at 11 seconds past 11 minutes past the 11th hour of that day. We had to delay a little bit because the President was at the NCOP in Mutu, in KZN. He joined us later that afternoon. We handed it over. The process is now open. The document now is not just between us and the President. It doesn't have a secret tag on it. It's not classified. It belongs to all South Africans. And that open process, the President said, will run for about 6 months. We will go out to all of the provinces and take the discussion forward, but people don't have to wait for that. Already in this week, I was pleasantly surprised by the number of very practical proposals that have come through onto the NPC website from people who've gone through, some say I haven't been able to go through all 400 pages, but I've gone through the chapter that I understand. I like this, but let me make the following suggestions, and here they are. And we're watching all of that. It's very important that people know they're not speaking into a vacuum. All of the commissioners evaluate these proposals on a daily basis and speak to the areas of expertise as we take this forward. At some point in May, and it's not a fixed date, this matter will go back to Cabinet. And by that time, the National Planning Commission would take account of the many proposals we receive. We'll recast this, strengthen the areas that need to be strengthened, and Cabinet will have to give it the final okay. Then it becomes an official document.
All right, let's go to table number 34.
No, that's a lucky table. Is that a ball in the lottery or
something? Is it Grathel Mutau?
Yes.
All right, so if you could stand up, say your name clearly, and ask your question. And you can speak up.
My name is Grathel Mutau from KPMG. I'd like to commend the Minister and the Commissioners for thought leadership. I really believe it's truly what this country is what we're looking for at the moment. Minister, one of the pillars of this plan is around the exports and competitiveness. Now, around the exports, given the fact that one of our established markets, Europe, they are going through difficult times, and in the next couple of years, 2 to 3, 5 years, the whole world will be going through the challenges. Can the Minister please elaborate on how the plan plans to look at the exports going forward?
Thank you, Grathel. The plan has an interesting chapter which we've called Drivers of Change. And in the Drivers of Change chapter, there are 6 issues that are going to be important for us to engage with over the next 20 years. The first of these is that there's actually a tilt in the economic center of gravity from west to east. Then there's interconnectivity, there's technology, there's climate change, there's the resurgence of Africa. Now, there are 2 parts to what I want to say. The first is that if we continue to believe that the only market that will receive our exports is the market where our former colonial masters are based, then we are in a hiding to nothing. Understanding that tilt in the center of gravity from west to east becomes exceedingly important for every South African decision maker to understand. There's nothing inevitable about it. There's nothing inevitable. Don't think that merely because we're in BRICS, along with Brazil, India, Russia, and China, that they'll say the doors are open because every country would like to maximize its own employment. We have to work, but we need to understand that the tilt in the center of gravity is going to create opportunities in entirely new areas. It means that the product that we produce, what we export, needs to be different because the demands of those markets are going to be very different from the mature markets that we've come to know in the West. The second part of the answer is, of course, the resurgence of Africa is fundamentally important. We are in a position, Grathel, where whilst intra-African trade is low, it's like just around the 11% mark. South Africa's trade with the rest of the continent is just over 25% of what we trade. It places us in a very strong position, but also trade can never be sustained if it's a one-way activity. So it's actually in our interest to take a long view on the African continent to ensure that there's infrastructure and economic development, because a notion that says you grow pumpkins in Swaziland and we grow pumpkins in South Africa, we'll buy yours if you buy ours, is not trade that's sustainable. We need to get a differentiated economy, and we need to understand that the billion people on the African continent are going to be fundamentally important to defining our economic relations. And it's working in these areas where I think that we would sympathize and empathize with the events taking place in Europe, but I think we will also take a longer view of where the next set of opportunities will come from. Thanks.
Minister, here's a question that comes up often. I've seen it, and it's been raised a few times. Two people today have asked this question as well. Andre Opperman, who's on table number 32, and Asif Jatham, who's on table 15. Asif says, Honorable Minister, when are you running for president? We salute you. And Andre Opperman says, Mr. Manuel, when will you avail yourself to be elected president of this country? You're one of the longest serving ministers. You have the experience. If the movement asks you, will you bow to their wishes?
You know, I watched an interview with President Barack Obama's sister recently. She'd written a book about their late mother, and it's a children's story. It's a very beautiful book. And they asked her in the interview whether she has any wishes. And she says, the only wish I have is for my brother to be able to lead a normal life again. I want Barack and Michelle and the girls to be able to walk in Central Park in New York and just be normal and not have, Secret Service all around them. And the problem about taking high office is if you value your privacy, you never get it back. And so, I actually enjoy my privacy. And it's not something I would consider. I would even say to the movement that I love and serve, no, I value my privacy.
So what if your country needs you?
There are a variety of ways of serving, and I've had the distinct privilege of having been able to serve in government for close on to 18 years now. It's a distinct privilege. The emphasis has to be on service. I know that there's a lot of things said and done, and all kinds of debates. I can still walk around in most places. I haven't made sufficient enemies, and I can drive around. I still haven't earned the right to have a blue light. That's me.
All right, I'm just going to check with my team whether we still have time for more questions. All right, okay. Sandile Mbele, you're on table number 27. Where are you, Sandile? Do you want to stand up, and we'll give you a microphone, because you're quite concerned about the role the MPC plays.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, Mr. Minister. What I wanted to know as a person that's in the private healthcare industry is what has been the involvement of the NPC in charting the way or drafting the developments of the national health insurance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandile. We, both in the diagnostic but also in the plan, have given a lot of attention to health issues. And the approach of the Commission is actually to focus on two aspects. The one is to recognize that there are too many people who are patients within the health system who don't actually need to be, and some of these can be changed by behavior. So, looking at issues as elementary as driving behavior to interpersonal violence, to all of the issues associated with non-communicable diseases. The National Planning Commission would argue, or we do argue, that we need to take more people out of the health system by focusing on collective wellness in society. Now, if we do that, then I think the people who are desperately in need of health care should then be able to benefit from a situation where one of the big constraints that we have is the number of skilled personnel. But if they are caught up with people who are there because they were injured in road accidents or stabbed by friends and so on, then you don't have sufficient healthcare workers to be able to provide the care, right? So we'd like to focus on separating these issues as we proceed, but in respect of the NHI, there are pretty detailed proposals, broad support for the NHI and its phasing in. I think the Commission would say that the National Health Insurance doesn't resolve all of the contradictions. It is a means of paying for health. It is the prevention of payment at the point of service. But if you want the NHI to flourish, then we must actually work with government to ensure that we can upgrade the capacity and the entire environment of public health care as well, because the gap between public and private is too great. And no single system can sustain this. So we don't believe that the NHI is a panacea, but it will make a very significant difference to choice and the quality of healthcare as we proceed. But it does mean that there are a number of prior steps, and in respect of a number of these issues, I know that my colleague Aaron Motsoaledi is ad idem with the National Planning Commission in the approach we take on this. Thanks.
All right, Charlie Peterson, you're on table, is it T32? I'm not sure. Charlie Peterson with CTRAC from Zanzibar. If you could stand up, you have a question, I think that will resonate with quite a number of people actually. A microphone is over there. And
Mr. Minister, my question actually is a straightforward one. It's about funding that government is giving, to departments like IDC, and it always say that it's available and people really don't get access to that funding, and people need the funding, but there's a lot of red tape in government to obtain that funding for ordinary people.
The development finance institutions in the main are not on the budget of government. They have to raise resources in capital markets. The IDC, the DBSA, the Land Bank in particular, have been able to reduce the cost of borrowing by having partnerships with some of the development finance institutions in other parts of the world. But the cost of borrowing is always an issue. The IDC needs to broaden its base. There are discussions underway to ensure that its capitalization can be increased to ensure that it will lend. But the IDC's mandate is an industrial development mandate. There is also a view that it may have taken on too many areas of lending that are not closely related to the core mandate set out in the statute called the Industrial Development Corporation Act. And how we bring those issues together is a work in progress. I'm sure if my colleague Ibrahim Patel were here, he would be able to give you detailed chapter and verse. But it always is difficult. It always is difficult because we need to ensure that people who apply for funding have the business plan. and that the business plan can be supported and that people are going to be involved in running the business. I kind of think that too much borrowing for mere equity when the borrower doesn't actually participate in the activities of the company has used up a large pool of our savings, and it hasn't actually driven ownership and control. There's a young man in this country who talks about the ownership of the means of production. It's a very important issue that we should take into account as we deal with this discussion. But the DFIs will be constrained unless we can expand the capital base and make the rules abundantly clear.
All right, so we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, I think we'll start to begin wrapping up some of the issues and questions that around this National Planning Development Plan. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be back at the ICC at the Sandton Convention Centre.